My goodness, thank you for such an exceptionally warm welcome. I'd like to thank Mel as well for gracious and generous words. I'm delighted, and I also feel honored to join the long and distinguished list of writers who've preceded me here. I can hear my own echo, which is beginning to bother me, but not as much as it might be bothering you. How am I doing so far as a sound test? That's honest, is it? I'm doing. This is good. All right. Generally, writers come here and they read from their works. And that's mostly how the time is filled. I've never done such an evening before. I have dipped into something I've written to illustrate a point during a talk. I've never advertised myself as somebody who will come and read from his work. I've always thought of it as being the soft option. I thought, well, anybody can do that. I have to go out there and think fast and answer questions. However, about a year or two ago, I was asked to give a lecture in London, and this particular lecture frightened me so much that I actually wrote it down and typed it and took it along with me to read out loud. And for the first time, of course, I arrived without a trace of nervousness. I knew exactly what I was going to say and how I was going to say it, and there it was. It was going to be an absolute cakewalk. About 30 seconds into my lecture, I realized for the first time that reading out loud from a script was a skill which I had not acquired. It was a horrible moment, and this little voice kept saying in my ear, stop gabbling, and look at them, or look at the page. I didn't know what I was doing. So this is by way of self-exculpation in advance. I've brought some things, and we're going to be here, till about 9 o'clock. The period which are set aside for questions will be either 40 minutes or 5. And the other thing is, have you had playwrights who read from their work? Because I don't do voices. Well, enough of this. About in the late 70s in Prague, I met a Czech playwright and novelist called Pavel Cahoot, who, along with other people, and for obvious reasons at that time, was prevented from practicing his art and his craft. And after a while, he got very frustrated, as he and his friends were apt to do, and he started something called the Living Room Theatre, to which end he produced a version of Macbeth cut down so that it could be performed by fewer than half a dozen actors, as I recall it, and one of them being his daughter. And this was the Living Room Theatre, and it was a dissident activity, if one can believe such a thing. And soon after meeting him and hearing about this, I wrote a play called Cahoots Macbeth. The whole title is Dog's Hamlet, Cahoots Macbeth. And it's almost a double bill. It's two plays joined by a comma rather than a paragraph. In this Cahoots Macbeth, my play began with a great big chunk of Macbeth. I mean, just on and on from the beginning. And I might interpolate a footnote, because I intend, if opportunity arises, to to speak about the practice of theatre, and perhaps to recall one or two examples. And this would be such an occasion, because one of the problems with Cahoots Macbeth as a play is that the long opening section, I think it's 15 minutes, which is simply Shakespeare reproduced. It's rather like an Andy Warhol picture. You think, well, who wrote this? I mean, surely Shakespeare wrote this. Is it art if you simply reproduce it precisely? But finally what happens is that the cops arrive, and one of my voices will be the inspector. Well, my only voice, actually. You know that the very earliest first draft edition of The Wasteland, Eliot's The Wasteland, its title was He'd Do the Police in Different Voices. I'll explain at the reception if necessary. So, as I was saying, one of the great problems, the practical problems of doing Cahoots Macbeth, and theatre is an event which has a time span and the problems that go with time spans. The problem was that it went on too long before the actors spoke, the characters spoke in their own identities, and I took over, as it were. And long after its first performance, long after I'd been involved in 2 or 3 of its productions, it occurred to me that there was an answer to this. And one day I suggested that after about 10 minutes, which was roughly where the middle of the carpet began to brush the floorboards. You know, when 2 men carry a rolled up carpet, after a certain length, the middle is touching the floor. And attention span is rather like that. I said, I'll tell you what, to precede the cops, why don't we just have a couple of cops come in with flashlights, and they don't do anything. They just look around and flash their torches at the audience. And suddenly there was an extra dimension to what was happening in this living room, and it was the first time the opening section of this play had really worked. End of footnote. So, in Macbeth, there's a point where there's light out there, and this is Shakespeare. "Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking, I would thou couldst." Well, in this event, the door opens and it's the cops. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is this the National Theatre?" "No, it isn't. Wait a minute. I could have made a mistake. Is it the National Academy of Dramatic Art, or, as we say down Mexico way, nada?" "No. No. I'm utterly nonplussed. I must have got my wires crossed somewhere." He checks the telephones. "Is it the home of the Bohemian Light Opera?" "It's my home," she says. "You live here?" "Yes." "Don't you find it rather inconvenient having a lot of preening exhibitionists projecting their voices around the place, and that's just the audience?" "I mean, who wants to be packed out night after night by a crowd of fashionable bronchitics saying, 'I don't think it's as good as his last one,' and expecting to use your lavatory at will? Not to mention putting yourself at the mercy of any Tom, Dick, or Berthold who can't universalize our predicament without playing ducks and drakes with your furniture arrangements. I don't know why you put up with it. You've got your rights. You've even got a telephone. I can see you're not at the bottom of the social heap. What do? I'm an artist. Well, it's not the first time I've been wrong. Is this phone practical? Who are you, pig-face? The character playing Macbeth, the actor playing the person playing Macbeth says, "Landowski." That's a real person too, by the way. I met him. The actor? The floor cleaner in a boiler factory. That's him. I'm a great admirer of yours, you know. I've followed your career for years. I haven't worked for years. What are you talking about? I saw you last season. My wife was with me. It couldn't have been me. It was you. You looked great. You sounded great. Where were you last year? I was selling papers in the newspaper kiosk at the tram terminus, and you were wonderful. I said to my wife, that's Landowski, the actor. Isn't he great? What a character. Wonderful voice. Get your paper. Up from here. No strain. Every syllable given its value. Well. And now you're sweeping floors, eh? I remember you from way back. I remember you when you were a night watchman in the builder's yard. And before that, when you were the trolley porter at the mortuary. And before that, when you were the button moulder in Peer Gynt. Actually, Pavel, you've had a funny sort of career. It's not my business, of course. Do you know what you want? In my opinion, the public is utterly confused about your intentions. Is this where you saw it all leading to when you started off so bravely all those years ago? I remember you and your first job. You were a messenger. Post office, was it? Antony and Cleopatra. Oh, right. You see, I'm utterly confused myself. Tell me, Pavel, why did you give it all up? You were a star. I saw your Hamlet, your Stanley Kowalski. I saw your Romeo with what's her name? Wonderful girl. Whatever happened to her? Oh, my God, don't tell me. Could I have your autograph? It's not for me. It's for my daughter. I'd rather not. The last time I signed something, I didn't work for 2 years. Now, look, don't blame me if the parts just stopped coming. Maybe you got overexposed. I was working in a restaurant at the time. There you are, you see. The public's very funny about that sort of thing. They don't want to get dressed up and arrange a babysitter only to find that they've paid good money to see Hedda Gabler done by a waitress. I'm beginning to understand why your audience is confused to your circle of acquaintances. Don't move. I mean, it gives one pause, doesn't it? Tonight, Macbeth will be played by Mr. Landowski, who last season scored a personal success in the newspaper kiosk at the tram terminus and has recently been seen washing the floors in No. 3 Boiler Factory. The role of Lady Macbeth is in the capable hands of Vera from the Dirty Spoon. Sounds like a rough night. And around about that time, I began as a journalist after I left school, and I really liked being a reporter. I loved it. I had a really good time. I was a reporter on an unimportant newspaper, though it was important to us. It was in a city in the west of England called Bristol, and I was on the daily paper there. And I really liked the whole thing. And after a few years, I found that I'd done most of the jobs available around the newspaper. I'd been a general reporter and done everything from flower shows to the magistrate's court and sport, interviewing people. And ultimately, I sort of slipped into theatre writing just when I might conceivably have got a job in London, and that's how things went. And I always remained very interested by journalism. I'm still a newspaper junkie. You know, every day I go and get yesterday's London papers. Sometimes I get the day before yesterday's London papers. I have 3-4 papers at home, and I try to get them all in New York. I mean, it's quite absurd. I don't know why I do it, but I do. So all this was written with love and awe, this play about journalists. It's called Night and Day. I'm not going to read very much of it at all, but thinking about what to read, I thought, well, there's just this page here which said something about me and how I felt about newspapers and the unabashed romance of newspapers. And the speaker is a young reporter in his 20s. He's in Africa, as it happens. I don't think you need to know that. And in these readings, I'm just not going to try to explain who these characters are and where they are and what the play is really about. I think we'll just wing it, and you can pick up what you can pick up, which is probably all that matters. He's called Milne. He says, oh, I know what you mean. They let me down too, arguing with the trots in the reporter's room. The press is the last hope for democracy. And I'd find I'm thumping my fist on some starlet's left nipple. You don't have to tell me. I know it better than you. The celebration of inanity and the way real tragedy is paraphrased into an inflationary spiral of hackneyed melodramas. Beauty queen in tug-of-love baby storm. Tug-of-love baby mum in Pool's win. Pool's man in beauty queen drug quiz. I know it's the price you pay for the part that matters. It's not easy to defend, but it's mainly attacked for the wrong reasons. People think that rubbish journalism is produced by men of discrimination who are vaguely ashamed of truckling to the lowest taste. But it's not. It's produced by people doing their best work, proud of their expertise with a limited number of cheap devices. Sorry, I know what I'm talking about because I started off like that, admiring it, trying to be that good, looking up to Fleet Street stringers, London men sometimes, on big local stories. I thought it was great. Some of the best times in my life have been spent sitting in a clapped-out Ford Consul outside a suburban house with a packet of polos and 20 players waiting to grab a bereaved husband or a footballer's runaway wife who might be good for one front page between oblivion and oblivion. I felt part of a privileged group inside society and yet outside it, with a license to scourge it and a duty to defend it, night and day, the street of adventure, the fourth estate. And the thing is, I was dead right. That's what it was, and I was part of it, because it's indivisible. Junk journalism is the evidence of a society that has got at least one thing right, that there should be nobody with the power to dictate where responsible journalism begins. I'm with you on the free press. It's the newspapers I can't stand. So that was a long and happy period of my life. And I wrote that play in 1978. Did I? Yes. And in a way, I'd like to write another play about journalism because my feelings have become more complicated about the press. And also, the press has changed a great deal, a very great deal in England since 1978. So at the back of my mind, I keep thinking I should get back to this subject, but not tonight. I felt that, rather like a saloon singer, it's incumbent upon me to, do the only one which ever sold, etc. My album of greatest hit and all that. Arcadia is a play which became very much liked in America. It was very touching. It was done a lot, and I got a lot of letters from people, especially people at school and college, who wanted to talk about the play, and I received essays written about the play. The whole experience of Arcadia was, it was a very gratifying experience and a humbling one. So, thinking to myself that I should perhaps read something which is half familiar to some people, as well as perhaps something which wasn't familiar at all, which I think is probably true of Cahoots Macbeth. I picked one or two pages where there wasn't too much white on the page, in the sense that it meant that I didn't have to pretend that I knew how to do both people, one of them female. This is a young man and a young woman And the scene takes place in 1809 in an English country house. And the young man is the young lady's tutor, and he gives her her homework. And she looks at it. Alpha minus? Pooh, what is the minus for? For doing more than was asked. You did not like my discovery. A fancy is not a discovery. A jibe is not a rebuttal. You are churlish with me because Mamma is paying attention to your friend. Well, let them elope. They cannot turn back the advancement of knowledge. I think it is an excellent discovery. Each week I plot your equations dot for dot, x's against y's in all manner of algebraical relation, and every week they draw themselves as commonplace geometry, as if the world of forms were nothing but arcs and angles. God's truth, Septimus, if there is an equation for a curve like a bell, there must be an equation for one like a bluebell, and if a bluebell, why not a rose? Do we believe nature is written in numbers? We do. Then why do your equations only describe the shapes of manufacture? I do not know. Armed thus, God could only make a cabinet. He has mastery of equations which lead into infinities where we cannot follow. What a faint heart. We must work outward from the middle of the maze. We will start with something simple. I will plot this leaf and deduce its equation. You will be famous for being my tutor when Lord Byron is dead and forgotten. Back to Cleopatra, the homework. Oh, is it Cleopatra? I hate Cleopatra. You hate her? Why? Everything is turned to love with her. New love, absent love, lost love. I never knew a heroine that makes such noodles of our sex. It only needs a Roman general to drop anchor outside the window, and away goes the empire like a christening mug into a pawn shop. God save us. If Queen Elizabeth had been a Ptolemy, history would have been quite different. We would be admiring the pyramids of Rome and the great Sphinx of Verona. But instead, the Egyptian noodle made carnal embrace with the enemy who burned the great library of Alexandria without so much as a fine for all that is overdue. Oh, Septimus, can you bear it? All the lost plays of the Athenians, 200 at least by Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, thousands of poems. Aristotle's own library brought to Egypt by the noodle's ancestors. How can we sleep for grief? By counting our stock. 7 plays from Aeschylus, 7 from Sophocles, 19 from Euripides, my lady. You should no more grieve for the rest than for a buckle lost from your first shoe, or for your lesson book, which will be lost when you are old. We shed as we pick up, like travelers who must carry everything in their arms, and what we let fall will be picked up by those behind. The procession is very long, and life is very short. We die on the march, but there is nothing outside the march, so nothing can be lost to it. The missing plays of Sophocles will turn up piece by piece, or be written again in another language. Ancient cures for diseases will reveal themselves once more. Mathematical discoveries, glimpsed and lost to view, will have their time again. You do not suppose, my lady, that if all of Archimedes had been hiding in the great library of Alexandria, we would be at loss for a corkscrew. Later in the play, the play shuttles between 1809 and more or less now. And later in the play, a different couple, man and woman, are talking as follows. Why are you cross? I'm not cross. The man says, when your Thomasina was doing maths, it had been the same maths for a couple of thousand years, classical, and for a century after Thomasina. Then maths left the real world behind, just like modern art, really. Nature was classical, math was suddenly Picasso's. But now, nature is having the last laugh. The freaky stuff is turning out to be the mathematics of the natural world. You mean this feedback thing? What did you mean you were doing the same as she was doing? What are you doing? And the young man, who's a mathematics graduate, postgrad, says, actually, I'm doing it from the other end. She started with an equation and turned it into a graph. I've got a graph, real data, and I'm trying to find the equation which would give you the graph if you used it the way she's used hers. Iterated it. What for? It's how you look at population changes in biology. Goldfish in a pond, say. This year, there are X goldfish. Next year, there will be Y goldfish. Some get born, some get eaten by herons, whatever. Nature manipulates the X and turns it into Y. Then Y goldfish is your starting population for the following year. Just like Thomasina. Your value for Y becomes your next value for X. The question is, what is being done to X? What is the manipulation? Whatever it is, it can be written down as mathematics. It's called an algorithm. It can't be the same every year. The details change. You can't keep tabs on everything. It's not nature in a box, but it isn't necessary to know the details. When they're all put together, it turns out the population is obeying a mathematical rule. The goldfish are? Yes. No. The numbers. It's not about the behavior of fish. It's about the behavior of numbers. This thing works for any phenomenon which eats its own numbers. Measles epidemics, rainfall averages, cotton prices. It's a natural phenomenon in itself. Spooky. Does it work for your grouse? I don't know yet. I mean, it does, undoubtedly, but it's hard to show. There's more noise with grouse. Noise. Distortions, interference. Real data is messy. There's 1,000 acres of moorland that had grouse on it, always did till about 1930. But nobody counted the grouse. They shot them. So you count the grouse they shot. But burning the heather interferes. It improves the food supply. A good year for foxes interferes the other way. They eat the chicks. And then there's the weather. It's all very, very noisy out there. Very hard to spot the tune. Like a piano in the next room, it's playing your song. But unfortunately, it's out of whack. Some of the strings are missing. And the pianist is tone deaf and drunk. I mean, the noise. Impossible. What do? You start guessing what the tune might be. You try to pick it out of the noise. You try this, you try that, you start to get something, it's half-baked, but you start putting in notes which are missing or not quite the right notes. And bit by bit, dum-de-dum-dum, dum-dum, dum-de-dum-dum-dum. Happy birthday to you, dum-dum. The lost algorithm. I see, and then what? I publish. And finally, he says, if you knew the algorithm and fed it back, say, 10,000 times, each time there'd be a dot somewhere on the screen. You'd never know where to expect the next dot. But gradually, you'd start to see this shape, because every dot would be inside the shape of this leaf. It wouldn't be a leaf, it would be a mathematical object. But yes, the unpredictable and the predetermined unfold together to make everything the way it is. It's how nature creates itself on every scale, the snowflake and the snowstorm. It makes me so happy to be at the beginning again, knowing almost nothing. People were talking about the end of physics. Relativity and quantum looked as if they were going to clean out the whole problem between them, a theory of everything. But they only explained the very big and the very small, the universe, the elementary particles. The ordinary-sized stuff, which is our lives, the things people write poetry about, clouds, daffodils, waterfalls, and what happens in a cup of coffee when the cream goes in, these things are full of mystery, as mysterious to us as the heavens were to the Greeks. We're better at predicting events at the edge of the galaxy or inside the nucleus of an atom, than whether it'll rain on Auntie's garden party 3 Sundays from now, because the problem turns out to be different. We can't even predict the next drip from a dripping tap when it gets irregular. Each drip sets up the conditions for the next. The smallest variation blows prediction apart. And the weather is unpredictable the same way, will always be unpredictable. When you push the numbers through the computer, you can see it on the screen. The future is disorder. A door like this has cracked open 5 or 6 times since we got up on our hind legs. It's the best possible time to be alive, when almost everything you thought you knew is wrong. Right, well, here's the thing. I don't know about this. I brought with me 3 or 4 short things which I'm working on at the moment. I mean, it's the same thing, 3 or 4 short bits. This is a play which I guess will be performed next year with any luck, all going well. I really wouldn't like it very much if in some way it was transcribed and appeared in print somewhere before that happened. I'd appreciate if that didn't happen. And if you think it won't, I'll read some of it. And some of it I wrote last night. You can later guess which bit it is. It'll be the bit which isn't as good as the rest. Look, Mel referred to 19th century Russians. I was interviewed recently, and the reporter very properly just wanted to check a few things. And in the course of checking 1 or 2 things, it turned out that she had me down as writing about 19th century passions rather than 19th century Russians. Which, in fact, is not wholly inaccurate, is it? Okay, so I'm working on something which is set in, well, in all it'll be kind of like from 1830-odd to 1850-odd. This bit we're talking about here is around about 1836. And these are Russian, it's the birth of the Russian intelligentsia. I think it's boring if I start trying to explain what's going on here. It seems to me that I feel it works okay if I just read it and you just take what you take and the rest come back next year, whatever. Is that all right with you? All right. Well, there's an older man and a young man. They're not related. The young man is radical. He's made some remark about serfdom. And the older man says, "My estate is of 500 souls, and I am not ashamed. The landowner is the protector of all who live on his land. Our mutual obligations are the foundation on which Holy Russia rests. In the way of life at Premukino, there is true liberty. I know about the other kind, if I may say so. I was in France when they had their revolution." Yes, I mean, allow me, my article is not about our liberties, of course. When was there ever such an article published in Russia? I write about literature. You said we had no literature. That's what I write. We haven't. We have a small number of masterpieces. How could we not? There are so many of us. A great artist will turn up from time to time in much smaller countries than Russia. But as a nation, we have no literature because what we have isn't ours. It's like a party where everyone has to come dressed up as somebody else. Byron, Voltaire, Goethe, Schiller, Shakespeare, and the rest. I am not an artist. My play was no good. I am not a poet. A poem can't be written by an act of will. When the rest of us are trying our hardest to be present, A real poet goes absent. We can watch him in the moment of creation. There he sits with a pen in his hand, not moving. When it moves, we've missed it. Where did he go in that moment? The meaning of art lies in the answer to that question. To discover it, to understand it, to know the difference between it happening and not happening. This is my whole purpose in life. And it is not a contemptible calling in our country where our liberties cannot be discussed because we have none, and science or politics can't be discussed for the same reason. A critic does double duty here. If something true can be understood about art, something will be understood about liberty too, and science and politics and history, because everything in the universe is unfolding together with a purpose of which mine is a part. You're right to laugh at me because I don't know German or French, but the truth of idealism would be plain to me if I had heard one sentence of shelling shouted through my window by a man on a galloping horse. When philosophers start talking like architects, get out while you can, chaos is coming. When they start laying down rules for beauty, blood in the streets is from that moment inevitable. When reason and measurement are made authorities for the perfect society, seek sanctuary among the cannibals. Because the answer is not out there like America waiting for Columbus, the same answer for everybody forever. The universal idea speaks through humanity itself and differently through each nation in each stage of its history. When the inner life of a nation speaks through the unconscious creative spirit of its artists for generation after generation, then you have a national literature. That's why we have none. Look at us, a gigantic child with a tiny head stuffed full of idolatry for everything foreign, and a huge inert body abandoned to its own muck, a continent of vassalage and superstition, an Africa of know-nothing, have-nothings without a notion of a better life or the wit to be discontented, drunk or sober. That's your Russia, held together by police informers and 14 ranks of uniformed flunkies. How can we have a literature? Folk tales and foreign models, that's our lot, swooning over our imitation Racines and Walter Scotts. Our literature is nothing but an elegant pastime for the upper classes, like dancing or cards. How did it happen? How did this disaster befall us? Because we were never trusted to grow up. We're treated like children, and we deserve to be treated like children, flogged for impertinence, shut into cupboards for naughtiness, sent to bed without supper, and not daring even to dream of the guillotine. Yes, I've got off my track. Hell and damnation. Excuse me. It's always happening to me. I forget what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry. Every work of art is the breath of a single eternal idea. That's it, forget the rest. Every work of art is the breath of a single eternal idea breathed by God into the inner life of the artist. That's where he went. Later, he... the same person... whom I haven't made up, by the way. I made up what he said. Otherwise, I don't get the money. I mean, the same person. Well, never mind. I'll just read it. Yes, I'm preparing an article against him. There'll be no mercy for Chevriev. I thought I was going to be literally sick when I read his essay on the genteel. Gentility and art are not synonyms. Gentility is the property of caste. Art is the property of intelligence and feeling. Otherwise, any toff could walk in here and claim himself a writer. And this toff says, oh, quiet. I'm losing my youth and my health and making enemies all over the shop when I could be surrounded by admirers who want nothing from me except to take away my independence. Because I believe literature alone can, even now, redeem our honor. Even now, in words alone that have ducked and dodged their way past the censor, literature can become, I don't know what I'm saying half the time, and that's the half that is as plain to me as a glass of water. You mean literature can make itself useful with a social purpose? No! Let social purpose hang itself unhindered. Art has the right to be useless, an end in itself and for its own sake. No, I mean literature can actually become Russia. It can be greater and more real than the external reality, more real than this haunted ruin that was never even a building. It only has to be true. Art is true or false. Everything else about it is up to the artist, but on that, we're in the emperor's seat. Hail or good night. Not true to the facts, not true to appearances, but true to the innermost of the innermost doll, where genius and nature are the same stuff. That's what makes an artist moral. The moment he has a thesis, he is no longer moral. He's merely a moralist, a huckster, maybe talented, but that's not it. It won't help us when every time we say Russia, we have to grin and twitch like half-wits from the embarrassment of a mother country that has given nothing to the world and taken nothing from it. Russia, yes, I'm afraid so. You've got it the backwoods. No history but barbarism, no law but autocracy, no glory but brute force, and all those contented serfs. We're nothing to the world except an object lesson in what to avoid. But a great artist can change all that, make it irrelevant. Well, not one, but even one. Even Pushkin for a start. I mean, Pushkin up to say Boris Godunov, he's finished now, hasn't written a great poem for years, but even Pushkin or Gogol's new story, definitely Gogol. And there's more to come. I know they're coming, and soon. Here things are growing not by the year, but by the hour. Every time I open an envelope, I wonder whether it's going to make last week's magazine completely out of date. You see what I'm saying? When the word Russia makes you think of great writers and almost nothing else, the job will be done. You'll be able to walk down the street in London or Paris, and when someone asks you where you're from, you can say, Russia. I'm from Russia, you poor bastard, so what do you think of that? That's not his final position on the social purpose of art, by the way. When was that? That was 1836. This is 1843. I also remember telling you that art and society shouldn't get in each other's way. I believed that from the beginning, that the artist expresses his age by singing with no more purpose than a bird, with no more purpose than Pushkin. But that's nonsense too. The man and the artist can't pass each other in the doorway, taking turns to be at home. There's only one person under the roof. He can't be separated from himself and must be judged as a whole in his time and place. Tatiana loves Onyegin, but stays faithful to the dullard she married, a heroine to her creator. In the age of George Sand, she's a joke, stuck in a moribund convention, a dullard herself. And yet, if I could bring Pushkin back to life by reducing George Sand to a fine powder and sprinkling it on his grave, I'd leave for Paris tonight with a coffee grinder in my luggage. The whole thing is not entirely about, but a great deal about what is the social duty of the artist. It's a question which this particular person, he was called Belinsky, never resolved. He hopped about round and round, and the result is that ultimately everybody found what they wanted in the writing he bequeathed. The communists renamed the town of his upbringing Belinsky, but the formalists, the Acme poets, the art for art's sake people also found what they were looking for in Belinsky, because he believed that he was an atheist, but he was a religious one, and he believed that there was truth on an intuitive, inspirational level, which was accessible to certain special people, artists and philosophers, for example. I say this with no particular pride or proprietary. I don't know about that, but that's a large part of what was going on there. Look, this is it pretty much. What happens here is that it's a play which tries to concern itself with different responses to living in a tyranny. At that time, there were people who were revolted by the external world of Tsarist Russia, incapable of dealing with it, unwilling to join with it, and they became literally superfluous to society, and Pushkin was the first person who termed them superfluous men. But there were others who turned inward into German idealistic philosophy, which was relatively new and exciting then, and others studied the French Revolution, so you get the picture. And one of the people who preferred to study the French Revolution rather than Hegel was Alexander Herzen. And he was a man of genius. He ended up living in London, where he published a newspaper in Russian. And he died in, I think it's 1870. No, let me think. Yeah. And he set himself with all his might and all his spirit against the idea that we're all the playthings of a single principle, a cosmic force, whether it was the Marxist one, that history is the dialectic as contrived by the class struggle, or the early French socialists, or the Hegelian, who felt that we were all more or less, privileged to be the ants in the great dialectical cosmic spirit, the progress of that. He absolutely rebelled against that. Anyway, that you don't need to know any of that. Here's him. Here he is talking. I'll try and skip through a little bit because that's his side of the picture. What is wrong with this picture? You remember those puzzle pictures when we were children? There'd be a drawing with things wrong in it: a clock with no hands, a shadow going the wrong way, the sun and stars out at the same time, and it would say, "What is wrong with this picture?" Someone sitting next to you in class disappears overnight. Nobody knows anything. In the public gardens, ice creams are eaten in all the usual flavors. What is wrong with this picture? The Kritsky brothers disappeared for insulting the Tsar's portrait, Antonovich and his friends for forming a secret society, meaning they met in somebody's room to read a pamphlet you can buy on the street in Paris. Young men and women are mating like swans on the skating ground. A crocodile of Poles goes clanking by in leg irons on the Vladimir Road. There is something wrong with this picture. Are you listening? You're in the picture. Professor Pavlov, with a twinkle in his eye, has taken to buttonholing us with philosophy. You wish to understand the nature of reality. But what do we mean by reality? By nature? What do we mean by understand? So, that's philosophy, well. And at Moscow University, teaching it is forbidden as a threat to public order. Professor Pavlov's class is actually physics and agriculture. It's only by centrifugal force that he goes flying off from crop rotation to Schelling's philosophy of nature. But what with Father Ternovsky substituting on female diseases and the professor of gynecology returning the favor on the Immaculate Conception, nobody is the wiser. So that's all right. When Sangurov was being taken to Siberia, he managed to give his escorting officer the slip. But the police got on his track, and when he saw there was no escape, he cut his throat, but not enough. So they tried him again and sent him to the mines, and his property was confiscated. This property consisted of 250 souls in the Bronitsky district of Moscow and 450 souls in Nizhny Novgorod. What is wrong with this picture? Nothing. It's Russia. A landowner's estate is reckoned not in acres but in adult male serfs, and the agent of reform is not the rebellious slave but the repentant master. What a country! Napoleon had to drag us into Europe before our embarrassment at ourselves put seditious thoughts of reform into the heads of the returning army officers, and in the end, their heads into a noose. One day, not long after the Tsar celebrated his coronation by hanging the Decembrists, my father took me and my best friend Nick Agaryov for a drive in the country. I was 14, and until I met Nick, I thought I was the only boy like me in the whole of Russia. At Luzhniki, we crossed the river. Nick and I ran on ahead, up to the Sparrow Hills. At the top, you could see all the roofs and cupolas of the city shining in the setting sun. And we suddenly embraced and made a sacred vow to dedicate our lives, yes, sacrificed them, if need be, to avenge the Decembrists. It was the hinge of my life. For me, it was reading Schelling's System of Transcendental Idealism. That is almost unforgivable. Thank you.